Have you ever watched your own backyard turn into a war zone because one woman decided your family's history was an eyesore? What if the neighborhood's self-appointed queen thought she could erase decades of your blood and sweat just to match her beige color palette? And what happens when that Karen finally meets the one person who owns not just the barn, but the ground she's standing on? Maple Ridge looked like the perfect American suburb on the surface. White picket fences, identical lawns trimmed to military precision, and rules for everything from the exact shade of your welcome mat to how many holiday lights you could string before December 15th. But underneath that plastic perfection lurked Deborah Kensington, the HOA president who treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. Debbie, as she insisted everyone call her with that syrupy smile, had arrived 6 months earlier from the city with her laminated rule book, her pastel cardigans, and an insatiable hunger for control. She spoke in soft, reasonable tones about community standards and protecting property values for the children, but everyone knew it was really about power. Pure, clipboard-wielding power. I was Megan Whitaker. I'd kept quiet for months. After my husband passed, Debbie started the whispers at every block party. Megan's letting the place go to ruin. Have you seen that eyesore barn? It's dragging down everyone's equity. She even circulated a little petition once, just to help her sell and move on, and half the neighbors signed before they realized what they were signing. I stayed silent, nodding politely at meetings, smiling through the passive-aggressive comments about rustic charm. But I was watching. Every fine she slapped on the single mom down the street for a kid's bike left out overnight. Every citation for the old veteran's American flag being too large. The hypocrisy was almost funny, if it wasn't so infuriating. Debbie's own yard somehow never got inspected, even when her rose bushes were leggy and her driveway had weeds taller than the HOA handbook allowed. The beige SUV crept up my gravel driveway like a shark circling blood in the water. Debbie stepped out, adjusting her blazer as if arriving at a board meeting. Her short blonde bob didn't move in the breeze, and her nose wrinkled at the smell of real country air instead of that chemical, fresh linen spray she loved. "Megan, sweetie," she cooed with that saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "I've been meaning to discuss your structure." She gestured at my grandfather's red barn like it was a crime scene taped off by the fashion police. I stayed leaning against the old wooden fence, coffee in hand, voice calm. "It's a barn, Debbie. Been here 80 years. Grandpa built it before this subdivision even existed." She pulled out her laminated Bible of rules like it was the Ten Commandments. According to Section 12, Subsection 4, all external buildings must meet approved design standards. Your relic violates the color palette, the scale, and honestly, darling, it's just not in keeping with our vision for Maple Ridge. Property values. You understand. I let out a short laugh that tasted like iron. Vision? This barn predates your HOA by decades. My great-grandfather settled this county. Every inch from the courthouse to the grocery store sits on family land. Be that as it may, she sighed theatrically, hand on her heart like she was delivering bad news at a funeral. The HOA is here to protect everyone's investment. You'll need to remove it, or face fines, starting at $500 per month until it's gone. For the greater good. Of course. The first certified letter arrived 3 days later. Then the lawyer. The very next morning, I woke to 2 cars crunching on gravel. Debbie's beige SUV and a sleek black sedan. Out stepped a tall man in a navy suit, silver glasses perched low, flipping through a thick binder like he already owned the verdict. Richard Henshaw, HOA legal counsel. "Megan," Debbie said. "All business now. Mr. Henshaw has reviewed everything. Your property, despite its so-called historical background, falls under our jurisdiction. The barn must go." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the steam rise between us like a shield. "You two really don't do your homework, do you?" Henshaw cleared his throat, confident as a man who'd never lost in court. "The bylaws are clear. Non-compliant structures can be removed by force if necessary. Fines first, then legal action." I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Then you should know my family's land predates the HOA by generations. It was never annexed. Your rules don't apply here." Check the county records office. I'll wait. Debbie's eye twitched. Henshaw's confident smirk faltered for half a second. We'll verify, he said stiffly. You do that, I replied, turning back toward the house. And while you're there, maybe look up who actually owns the land your fancy office sits on. Hint, it's not the HOA. They drove off in a cloud of dust and bruised egos. But I knew this wasn't over. Debbie wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. She'd be back with more tricks, more laminated lies, and that same fake smile hiding the panic of a woman who felt her throne slipping. By mid-afternoon, I drove into town myself. Sure enough, her SUV was parked outside the county clerk's office like it owned the place. Inside, Alice Parker, the sharp-as-a-whip clerk who'd known my family since I was in pigtails, was leaning back in her chair while Debbie stood stiffly, face growing redder by the second. I don't know how else to say this, Alice drawled, tapping a manicured nail on the desk. The Whitaker land was never incorporated into your HOA private deed since before paved roads existed. Your bylaws don't apply. Full stop. Debbie's voice went clipped. There must be some mistake. Alice laughed, short and sharp. The only mistake is you thinking you have authority over land you don't own. I stepped forward then, boots loud on the wooden floor. Afternoon. Alice. Just checking if Debbie finally figured out she's fighting a losing battle. Debbie spun, eyes narrowing. This isn't over. Megan. Seems pretty over to me, I said with a shrug. Henshaw snapped his binder shut. Defeated. They stormed out, Debbie's heels clicking like angry little gunshots. But desperate people get reckless. The next morning, I woke to heavy machinery rumbling at my property line. A backhoe idled, crew standing around, and there was Debbie, clipboard in hand, directing them like a general. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, hands on hips. We're installing a new HOA boundary fence, she said smugly. Property lines weren't properly marked before. We're just fixing that, for everyone's safety. I laughed, loud and sharp, the kind of laugh that echoes with disbelief. You're joking. She held up the clipboard like a shield. The HOA has authority to delineate boundaries when they butt against community land. I stepped closer, voice low. You step 1 inch onto my property with that thing, and you'll wish you hadn't. Are you threatening me? She sneered. No, Debbie. I'm stating a fact. I pulled out my phone, dialed the county surveyor on speaker. Hey, Jim. Quick question. Did the HOA request a survey on my land recently? The gruff voice boomed back. Nope. Last survey was 5 years ago. No changes. I locked eyes with her. Thanks, Jim. The crew foreman looked uncomfortable. Ma'am. Debbie's face turned the color of a bad sunburn. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stomped away, the crew scrambling after her like rats from a sinking ship. That was her critical mistake. Trying to encroach on land she had no claim to gave me the leverage I needed. I spent the rest of the day gathering deeds, surveys, and every document proving the HOA's grip was imaginary here. Then I started knocking on doors. The neighbors spilled everything. Mrs. Thompson showed me a stack of bogus fines for improperly maintained flower beds. Young Dad Greg had been hit for leaving trash cans out a few hours past pickup. One woman had been fined for her kid's swing set because it didn't match the aesthetic. Everywhere the same story, Debbie making up rules, enforcing them selectively, bullying people into compliance while preaching family values. By evening, I called a meeting at the community center. Nearly the entire neighborhood showed up, tired faces, angry eyes. We all know why we're here, I began. Debbie's been abusing her power. It's time we do something. The room erupted. Petitions were signed. Complaints documented. By midnight, we had everything for a recall vote. The next morning, we marched into the HOA office. Debbie sat behind her desk like a queen on a cardboard throne. When she saw the crowd, her face went pale. What is this? She demanded. I placed the petition down. A recall vote. You've lost the community's confidence. Debbie, time to step down. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the signatures. This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. Greg spoke up. You've done nothing but make our lives miserable with your power trips. Even Henshaw looked defeated. The petition meets the threshold, he admitted quietly. A vote must be held. Debbie's jaw clenched. But she knew. The vote was held a week later. Overwhelming majority. She was out. As she packed her office, the same people she'd bullied watched in silence. When she finally walked out, she paused, turning to glare at me one last time. "You think you've won," she hissed. I smiled. "I know I have." With Debbie gone, the new board actually listened. Bogus fines were revoked. Ridiculous rules reevaluated. People could finally breathe. Live without fear of a clipboard ambush at dawn. My barn still stood, proud and unchanged, just like it always had. But people like Debbie don't just slink away in defeat. They fester. 2 weeks later, my neighbor Robert pulled up in his truck. Expression grim. "Debbie's been spotted at the courthouse with a big-shot developer. Zoning change proposal for the land bordering yours. High-density condos. She's trying to expand the HOA's reach by changing the game entirely." My stomach tightened. But not with fear, with that cold, focused anger you get when you realize the snake isn't dead, just hiding under the porch. I spent the next days gathering proof. Alice at the records office showed me the preliminary filing. Debbie had convinced the developers she could push it through quietly before anyone noticed. 3 days later, the county held the public hearing. The room was packed. Debbie sat front and center beside the developer in her power suit, spinning tales of progress and economic growth for the children. I waited my turn, heart steady. When I reached the mic, the room quieted. I laid it all out. Her overreach, the recall, the power grab disguised as progress. Then I dropped the real bomb. The original land deeds proving my family's ownership predated any zoning. The proposal couldn't move forward without my consent, and I wasn't giving it. The crowd cheered. Residents who'd been silent for years stood up and shouted. The developer looked uneasy. County officials exchanged glances. The proposal was rejected on the spot. Debbie stood abruptly, chair scraping like nails on a chalkboard. "You're holding the town back," she shrieked. Mask fully shattered, voice cracking into something ugly and desperate. I just raised an eyebrow and motioned to the crowd, the very people she claimed to help. Not a single soul supported her. She stormed out, face a mask of barely contained rage. That should have been the end. But petty tyrants always have one last act. The next week, the harassment started. My mail disappeared. Packages never arrived. Unfamiliar cars idled down the road, watching. Fences were tampered with. Neighbors reported the same. Gates left open. Garbage bins knocked over. Tires mysteriously slashed. Small, vicious things meant to unsettle. Classic Karen tactics when legal power fails. If she couldn't control us with rules, she'd try fear. I installed hidden cameras. Quietly. Strategically. Robert and Greg did the same. 3 nights later, the gravel crunched outside at 2 a.m. I checked the feed, crystal clear. Debbie, dressed in black, hunched over my fence line, prying at a post with a crowbar, face twisted and bitter. Unhinged rage. The woman who once preached community standards now looked like a raccoon caught in a dumpster fire. I stepped outside with a flashlight. The beam hit her square in the face. She froze like a deer in headlights. Hair messy, makeup smeared, all her polished perfection gone. For a long second, I just let the silence stretch, watching her squirm under the light. Then I held up my phone. Smile for the camera. Debbie. High definition. Time-stamped. Everything. She tried the old act one last time. Voice trembling. "I was just checking the neighborhood security. You have no proof." I played the footage. Undeniable. Her prying. Her cursing under her breath about that Whitaker witch. Her face drained of color. No snappy comeback. No manipulative spin. Just raw, ugly panic. I gave her the choice. Voice calm as a Sunday morning. Pack up and leave town by morning. Or I press charges, trespassing, vandalism, harassment. With this footage, you'll face real consequences. Fines won't be the only thing you lose. She said nothing. The next morning, her house was listed for sale. Within days, the clipboard Karen was gone, tail between her legs, reputation in tatters. The neighborhood finally breathed easy. The new HOA board actually cared. Rules relaxed. People laughed again at block parties without glancing over their shoulders. My barn still stands, unmoved. Unbothered, just like me. People like Debbie don't want nice neighborhoods. They want kingdoms disguised as perfection. The real lesson? Never let a Karen with a rulebook forget that some legacies run deeper than bylaws. Stand your ground. Gather your people. Document everything. And watch the mighty clipboard fall. Justice isn't always loud. But when it comes for HOA tyrants, it's damn satisfying.